This video is part of a series on experiences of the Enneagram from the 27 subtypes. I'm aiming to interview people of each subtype, so you get to hear and experience what those different voices and life experiences sound like. I hope you enjoy. Hey Felicia, thank you for taking the time to share with us today. Can you share with us the country that you live in, your Enneagram type, subtype, and instinctual sequence?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Matt, for having me here. I am so excited. I'm an Enneagram Type 3. I am in the United States on the West Coast, and my instinctual subtypes is dominant self-preservation. And then I would say 1 to 1, and I'd say my repressed is the social subtype, which I think is a little odd for a Type 3 when I think about it. Most people think of the Type 3 archetype as like the showy, like upfront, like in your face, which I think of the social 3 being, but I know I'm motivated so different. I just don't, it's just not who I am. So I'm actually quite like pushed away from like thinking that that's actually bad, which is not true, but instincts.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Felicia. That is an important point that you've made there. As you've said, the social three is the quintessential three that most people think of with type three. So, as the self preservation three being the counter type, plus the social instinct being repressed, you're like the furthest away from the typical type three.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's which is funny because when we talk about Enneagram, I thought, yeah, I'm a 3 when you learn about it, and I but I always felt like, oh, I don't really want to be that. Maybe most people think that when they learn their number,
Okay.
um, but I know it. I know it to my core. Yeah, I'm a
Mm.
3.
Just out of interest, what was it about the three that you thought, oh, I don't want to be that?
Well, the showy part for sure. I
Okay.
I don't necessarily see myself like wanting to be upfront and in attention, like seeking it, like wanting people to like look at me and praise me. But I
Mm.
do want to be successful. And so that's kind of like drove me that way. And then the deceit part of it, I was really pushed off by that. I thought, like, no way, I'm not a deceitful person. I try my hardest to be good. Like, I don't want to be that. But reading further, learning about self deceit and how I can pull myself into these stories of I need to be this so that someone would think that I'm good, that I'm achieving,
Yeah.
that I'm successful, all of those things. I would deceive myself, like, oh, I need to become this to be that good or whatnot. So yeah. I don't want, you want those weaknesses, but once you know them and you can name them, it's beautiful. It's good to know so you can hopefully turn away and turn towards, the goodness of who you are, which I love.
Yeah, I find it really interesting what you shared there because with the CP Enneagram, Chestnut Pies Enneagram material that I've learned through the subtypes, they teach that the self preservation three wants to be good and not just look good.
Yes, I think it's so interesting because I would be mortified if someone thought that I was, trying to pretend to be virtuous. Like, I
Mm.
want to be that. I want to be the good person in the room. And I try so hard to
Oh,
present myself, to do practices, to try to become a better person. And yet, each day it's like how I don't want to fake it. I want to be real. I want to be that true good person out in the world. I don't want to be that showy, fake anything.
mm. Yeah, I've heard it also said that self preservation threes can sometimes mistype or look like self preservation ones.
Which is interesting because I'm married to a 1,
Ah, okay.
and I think I've always liked that he's so, um, like he's so direct and orderly, and he just has that really good dualistic thinking of right and wrong. He
Mm.
just knows, and I'm in this internal battle of like what's actually good, and well, I see this other side of it, and they're just so good at knowing, internally like this is right and that's the way I'm going to go with it unless they battle with their own things. But
Of
yeah,
course.
I love that about them, that they can just be that true, I know what's good. And so I will be good.
Yeah, just out of interest, what subtype is your husband?
Oh gosh, I tried really hard to get him to kind of read through it and name himself. He said he
Yeah.
didn't fit any of them.
Okay.
Honestly, maybe because he felt, and this is his own thinking, like he's like, well, I feel like it just pushes me more inward. And I told him it gave me more of a language of knowing who I am. So I don't
Mm,
know. And I don't want to say what he is because I don't know. I think he leans more towards one or the other, but yeah.
okay. Fair enough. When you said it kind of pushes him inward, is that another way of saying don't put me into a box?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
He doesn't like
Yeah.
that idea of he
Okay.
is all on board for the Enneagram with me.
That's
He
good.
knows, he knows the one, but for some reason he thought, well, why would we have like what do you mean by counter type? And what do you mean by like we already know the framework, we know the archetype. Why do we need anything more? And I said, well,
Okay. Yeah.
because we're all different, right? We all have more than just that framework of
Yeah.
who the Enneagram says that we are. So we could dive a little bit deeper into our behaviors and our motives. So, anyways, it just
Yeah.
wasn't for him. And I loved it. I actually thought it just made it so much more personable to me.
Wow. Yeah. That's lovely to hear, Felicia, because that was exactly my experience with it as well. And I think
Mm,
a lot of mistypes can happen when we just have the 9 types,
yeah.
because there's a lot of types that don't necessarily fit the core 9 type because of the counter type piece, and
Yeah.
self-preservation 3 is one of those examples.
Yeah. And remind me, did you say you were a self-preservation six?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's
Yeah.
fascinating. The six, if you've done the work and trying to kind of work through your type because of the it depends piece. I know so many sixes
Yeah.
fall into that. So that's so interesting.
Yeah. And it's interesting as well that I've heard other types say that it depends.
I have
Um,
two.
yeah. So it's not just
Yeah.
about just the wording of it. And I guess I relate that to behavior. Like people can have similar behavior,
Yeah.
but obviously, as you know, that what's motivating it is it can be completely different. So surface wise, it looks the same, but underneath the different motivations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thanks for sharing that, Felicia. So when it comes to the Enneagram, when did you first hear about it?
I think the first time I ever heard the word Enneagram was in 2014. And my
Okay.
husband was at seminary and he was doing a class on, I think, like self improvement, self care, pastoral self care, which is great.
Yeah.
And just one of the topics was, hey, here's the book on the Enneagram. If you want to use it, read through this and type yourself. But there was no like official training or anything, along with like Strength Finder and um, what is it, love language, like there was all of those things that were out there at the time. And so he brought it home and he's like, oh, this is another personality thing. And we were pretty bent on Strength Finder at that time. So I said, I don't need another profile to tell me Myers-Briggs. I got it. I'm good. So we just put it aside. We never really touched on it. I don't even know if he ever really described himself as any particular number at that time. And then in 2019, I had my second son. He was about a year old, and I was sitting on the couch with a friend, just saying, like, I feel like I don't know how to name my feelings, and I don't know how to like overcome like anxieties that I have, and I don't really know what to do. And she said, "Have you heard of the Enneagram?" And I said, that name sounds familiar. She said, "Well, I took this test online, and let me send it to you. It's free." It was the Your Enneagram Coach Assessment one, the free one. And she said, it talks about who you may be and what a weakness may be, things like that. Maybe that could help you. So I took that test and it came back as a 3. And like number one, there was no number higher than the other. It was a 3. And as I was reading the description, I said, no way could this thing get me so well. How is this? How does this know me? Like I felt so like
Wow.
staring into a mirror. It was, it was scary, but amazing. And in my excitement, I decided I needed everybody I knew to go take the test too. So I passed
Okay.
it on. I said, go take this test. And by then he said, yeah, sure. And he typed as a 1. I said, I knew it. I knew that had to be you. So I just dove in from 2019 and just keep learning more and more, and I'm just amazed by this tool.
Mm. Brilliant. Thanks for sharing that. So
Yeah,
since 2019, so you first heard about it in 2014,
yeah,
didn't really kind of go into it that much, but 2019, you mentioned about just talking to a friend about
yeah,
having feelings, and you mentioned anxiety.
yeah,
Yeah, which is quite common for the self-preservation three, having
yeah,
a lot of anxiety, but they don't necessarily realize the anxiety that's within them.
yeah, and go ahead.
Yeah, you carry on.
Oh, I was just thinking about back to that moment. I she's like my best friend, and I would never have, at least in that space, share that with others, what I was feeling
Okay,
in the moment.
right.
I do present as that three. Like I'm going to be the good person who knows what to do, who has a set plan, and all of my boxes in my life, because that's how I'm a planner, I'm an organizer, all
Yeah.
of the things three, they were checked. They were checked off. And I didn't know, like, where do I go now? Like I did all the things that I thought I said I was going to do, and now what? But those anxieties, so it definitely went to that like blind spot piece of I would, only with your close friends and your family do you share these things. And I was so uncomfortable feeling uncomfortable, but I didn't know how to name it at that time.
Yeah.
Knowing that that's a common thing, like, oh yeah, I can see myself. I get internally anxious, and I want that security that comes with preservation, right? I want to be secure in knowing that I'm going to be okay, that there is a plan forward, that I don't actually need to know all of the plans and the details. That's something I'm constantly working on, and just trusting and letting go. So anyways, a lot more of just that
Yeah.
point in my life where I know I've grown because I can name it publicly, right? Here we are. But at that time, I didn't know what to do. So I'm talking to my friend on a couch.
Wow. That seems it seems to have been like a significant tool for you in that self-awareness piece with your as a type three in the center of the heart triad. I've heard that threes are the most emotional, but
Yeah.
yet the least in touch with their emotions, and that seems to have rung true with your experience.
Oh man, I I would laugh because I I feel like I can take on anybody else's emotions and,
Okay.
join with them so easy. You're feeling sad, I will be sad. If you're feeling joyful, I will be joyful. It's so easy, but to name my own feelings is so hard. So hard to do, and to actually have to
Mm,
stop and think. And this is so typical of a three, that I've just recognized the power of like a feelings wheel, and being able to like look through and find a feeling that I can't name myself. I need help because I'm in that middle heart, right? Where I can recognize that I want to help others. And then I also strive towards that authenticity towards a four, but I don't really fit anywhere. I'm just kind of like, ugh. Like I take
mm,
in the feeling and then I don't want to deal with it. So I push it aside. I mean, that is me.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So since 2019, have you been on that? Has that been a significant part of your journey with growing in that awareness of your own emotions, being able to identify what they are, naming them, to be with them? What's that whole process been like for you?
Oh, yes, having the language to share, like to say out loud, like I am feeling something and I don't know why, or being able to say I'm repressing this because I'm scared, but I might be more than
Mm,
scared. Before I would just say, like I'm anxious, like I'm uncomfortable, and find something to do instead of sitting in the moment, recognizing that that's a pattern of a specific type, like myself, and saying like, no, I need to name it. I need to sit with it. I need to figure out what actual emotion it is. Is it sadness? Is it anxiety? Is it something else? Whatever. And then why. So understanding the why behind the behavior has, I mean, it's been mind blowing to me to say, like, oh, it's because I either want to be seen as good in the self preservation, I want to be seen as successful or efficient, or those words just like bring joy to me in my
mm,
heart. And I thought, well, I can't always be that. So how can I be okay when I'm not those things? And figure out who I am as a whole person. So absolutely, the Enneagram honestly has changed my life because I'm not sitting in that feeling of not knowing what to do next, right? So sitting on
Mm,
that couch and now I'm like, I know what I need to do. I need to focus in, I need to sit still, I need to not do
yeah.
and find a way forward. So it's been amazing.
Wow. That sounds like you've been on a really a significant growth journey in a relatively small space of time. Because I've heard it said that self-preservation threes are the hardest working subtype of all 27. So for you just to have shared that you've been practicing just being still and you don't have to do is very, very significant, a piece of work for a self-preservation three.
Yeah, workaholic. And it comes in different forms, not necessarily in the workplace. While I would say work has always been so important to me in the jobs that I've had. It could be anything. It could be, in the home. It could be in our church. It could be whatever thing that I've ascribed that I need to be successful at. I'm going to work hard at it and I'm going to be
Mm.
good at it. I'm not just going
Yeah.
to do it. I got to make sure that I am good. So to be able to step back and say, Felicia, you don't actually need that and you will be okay. You don't have to be successful at this. It's okay to fail. And
Mm.
surprisingly, becoming an Enneagram coach, which I am today, was at a pivotal moment, which is really recent. And within like the last year, I said my life, I felt, again, just what am I supposed to do? I like this thing, but what do I'm just going to take a leap, which I don't know if I'm going to be successful. I still don't know, but I don't necessarily need it, which I don't know if I would say 5 years ago. I would say like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to be really good at it, or I'm just
Mm.
going to stop and no one's going to know that I failed. Whereas now
Wow.
I'm really trying intentionally just focus in. What do I want? How does God want me to use this to benefit others? And I think like my world has been just again smashed open to say like, okay, yeah, this has nothing to do with me. This is for me to share to others what it's like to be an image bearer of Christ, to learn more about themselves so that they can turn towards God more and say like, yes, Lord, take this of
Mm.
me that I've now learned about, I can name, and have it and help me be more like you.
That's amazing, Felicia. That really is. Yeah, it's amazing. I just kind of feel like you've done so much growth work in such a short space of time.
I'm still working at it. I am, I
Yeah,
promise.
it's amazing. So, what other experiences have you had with the Enneagram? Obviously, with the emotional piece has been really significant for you, and the practicing being still, knowing that failure's really hard for a three, and
Mhm.
knowing that you can kind of see that and kind of be with it. What other significant ways has your experience with the Enneagram kind of helped with your life?
Well, it's helped me to be more gracious to others,
Okay.
whether they know their type or not. Just
Yeah.
learning more about others has helped me to have that compassion and grace, right? So to say, like, oh, I see that they're behaving this way, right? And I don't know why. I try not to type them, but maybe if I respond this way towards them, I could help them in some way. And it's actually been extremely helpful with my own children to say whether they're too young to type, but to say like, oh, they're doing this and I know what they could be leaning towards. Let me try this parenting style to see how they react. And it's been positive every single time, both to my children and to adults, with people I work with, to take the time to just give space for them to be who they are and not try to change them or say what they're doing is bad or wrong. um Again, just life-giving to say
Mm,
like in my
yeah.
relationships, um both with my husband and we've been able to again, it's all about having just that that language I keep saying, but just the words to name what you're feeling and thinking and doing and why. When I learn more about him and his, I remember asking him when I read about a one, I said, do you have an internal critic? Like it just,
Mhm.
what does that even mean? And he was
Yeah.
like, yeah, I never really would have called it that, but yeah, I'm constantly second guessing. I always have to think through what I'm going to do or what I'm going to say. He would he doesn't mind me telling this, I know, but he would sit with text messages to somebody, I mean, for 10, 15 minutes, writing message, like to make sure that there was nothing that he could have said that could be inferred differently than what he wanted to be said in that message. So we're
Mm,
talking paragraphs, because he really wanted to
mm,
make sure that it was good, that it was the right thing to be responding, and with the way that he was responding to it, if it was to bring up conflict in any way. So, anyways, it's helped us immensely to talk about how he's like, oh, I'm noticing you, Felicia, like you're pushing this away, but I know you're really upset. Let's sit down and talk. Oh, another really good thing he has brought out. He is an oral processor, and I am not, which
mm,
may seem surprising because I feel like I talk a lot. So forgive me. So he's an oral processor, and I'm not. I have to turn inwards, and just have time to think through it. But a practice that he's been helping me through is, um, where I'm just kind of sit in the moment and just talk through my thoughts out loud, because I want them to come out like the right or the best way. I want to sound good. And I will stop myself from actually saying what I think or what I feel and just go along with what someone else says or thinks or feels. Because again, I can take
mm.
on their emotion easily or what they're doing, no problem. But actually naming what I want or what I think is hard. So I would, I'll sit down and just close my eyes and just start thinking and talking out loud. This is what's going through my head, and this is why I'm struggling, and where could it be going? And stream of consciousness talking, that's what it's called. And it is, again, life giving because I want to just go inward. I don't want them to see those anxieties. But if I can just be in a safe space to do it, it's so good. So, anyways, fun things that have
Yeah,
changed my life through the Enneagram.
that's lovely. Thanks for sharing that, Felicia. And have there been other significant areas that the Enneagram to date has been really helpful in your life?
I think something that actually was really helpful was reading AJ Sherrill's book, Spiritual
Mm,
Formation Through the Enneagram, and learning about our identity being an image bearer of God. And I love his image in that book where the roots of this tree are our image of bearingness of God. And that's essentially what forms us. And that is what makes us who we are. And we don't need, it's a given. You can't lose it. It's just there. And the trunk of the tree is our personality or our type. And then the branches and the leaves are our behaviors. And I don't know if he says this or not, but the image sticks with me that we want our behaviors and we want our type to always be healthy enough to make sure that the root system, our image bearing, is actually going to stay healthy. Because if they don't, if they start to rot or fall away, then we're no longer representing God. And I don't want that. My whole goal in life, as I've turned towards God, is to say, like, I am yours, and I'm not you, but you've given me a piece. And so, how can I better represent you to the world that I'm in today? And I love what AJ says in the sense that as an image bearer of God, like we're the beloved child no matter what. So to take that on and take what God's given you as that little piece of what God is, seeing that through 9 other potential personalities and all of the 27 subtypes, it's amazing. It's amazing to see how good and diverse and beautiful that God is through the Enneagram, just through life, through people out in the world. It's so good.
yeah, yeah, I agree. Thank you, Felicia. It is amazing. So I know that you're also a Christian from what you've shared. Can
Yeah.
you share more about your experience with the Enneagram as a Christian and what that whole journey has been like for you?
So far, it's been just fine.
Okay.
I've had, I've read the skepticism, I've read and watched things that are out there, tried to do my own research as much as I could. I've read Richard Rohr's book, and um, you know, just being able to be aware of what's out there. But I found that most people that come back with the negativity towards Enneagram don't know what it is. They like to tell you what it's like, what it is versus like what it's not. And I always just try to lean into, okay, it's a tool. It's nothing more than a tool. I'm not going to make it to be this this thing is like, this is the only way that we can learn about ourselves, or the only way that we can get towards God is the way that I use it. No, we don't need it. We could never hear the word Enneagram and we would be just fine. But it is a tool that we can use to help ourselves. And so, why not? As somebody who strives on efficiency, this gives us a
Yeah.
way inward, right? To say, like, oh, once you know your type, then we have a path. You're not just kind of digging through this unknown angst and you're like, I don't know why I act this way. And I don't know why these things are my triggers, XYZ. When you have something like the incredible tool of the Enneagram, as a believer, you can say, you know what? Yeah, we do. We're all sinful people. And we have to take that on and we have to name it and we have to give it up, the best and the worst of
Mm,
ourselves, and say, it's not mine, it's God's. And I think when God calls us to like give our full selves, it requires more work than just saying, like, I believe. It's going to
mm,
be that lifelong work of
yeah,
uncovering who I am so that I
mm,
can give it back to God for his glory. And as a person who is also an Enneagram coach, I had to make that significant decision of, am I going to do this as a worldview, like popularity Enneagram, or am I going to use it as a tool that's going to build up others, as a faith based Enneagram coach? Because
mm,
we have people who do both, and that's perfectly fine. But for me, I said, I can't do this if it's not going to lead people towards God, because then what's the point?
mm,
I want people to grow deeper in their relationship with Christ above all. And if I can be helpful in that by providing them, practical tools or resources to knowing who they are so that they can get better at turning towards God, then that's what I'm going to use the Enneagram for as a believer. We led my husband and I are currently leading a class called Spiritual Formation Through the Enneagram. And he is the lead pastor of our church. And so I'm going through the types, just the general portion of it. But he's doing like tensions in scripture that, essentially are related to the passions of each Enneagram. So
mm,
type one, perfection versus grace. And type two, being a helper versus like resting, achieving, which is being versus doing, things like that. So those types of tensions. And then we give like practical ways that people, if they find themselves relating to a particular number that week, like, what could you do to turn towards Christ? What spiritual practice or discipline could you take on, that might be helpful to you if you see yourself in one of these numbers? And man,
mm,
as somebody who has, never developed a class before, it has been so life-giving to have people of the church just turn and recognize, like, oh yeah, that is me, or I know someone like that. And now I know how to help either myself or help them, which is really cool.
mm. That's really lovely for me to hear. It's lovely for me to hear that in your church, in your setting, other brothers and sisters in Christ are open to the Enneagram and are, receiving it well. It's lovely to hear. That is,
I know that's not the case everywhere. I know.
yeah,
I think we
yeah,
only had one naysayer, and it wasn't even a part of our church. So that was just surprising. I told my husband, I said, if we're gonna do this,
yeah.
just be
Be
prepared.
ready.
Be ready. Someone may say, but
Yeah.
as a one, I mean, he did his own research himself too, and made sure, like, anything we bring into the church is going to lead us toward God. And that is all. Every class we start, we always say, like, Enneagram is just a tool. Like, it is just a tool we're going to use. God wants us to give ourselves to Him, and you're more than a number. Like, this is just something to help us turn towards
Mhm.
God.
Yeah, and it really does help us because you shared earlier about reactions, and it helps us to know where we're triggered, and we can almost kind of go, okay, I'm walking into a situation here, into a relationship. I know what my triggers are. I know what my vulnerabilities are. I have a sense that I think I know what the other person's vulnerabilities and triggers are if I know their type, or I've kind of roughly kind of guessed what their type might be,
Yeah.
even though it's their responsibility if they want to own it and self-discover that for themselves. But
Mhm.
just that piece there in how to navigate relationships is listen, it is life changing. It is life changing.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I would hope that others, whether believers or non-believers, would be open to that fact. I think that there are a
Yeah,
good number of people that are trying to be good at it, but why not use something to help you be better at it? I mean, we take on
yeah,
self-help books. I mean, the self-help section at any public library or anywhere
yeah,
I mean, it's a huge, resource out there. So this is just think of it that way. It's not something that's supposed to take us away from God. If we're going to use it in that way, it's supposed to turn towards, and that's the way I want to use it to help
yeah.
others and help myself.
Yeah, and that's really good that you mentioned that piece, especially as a coach. Not just wanting to work with others, but it's quite clear that you're doing your own, investing in your own growth journey as well, and that's a lot of having a lot of integrity, and it's really important for us as coaches to be doing the work, ourselves, as well as working with other people on those deep levels.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. If someone's going to trust me with the things going on in their lives, then I also
yeah,
have to be prepared to recognize, like, what are the things in my life? I think
yeah,
therapists, at least over here, most licensed therapists have to go through therapy themselves so that there's no what they call counter transference, nothing going on in
mm,
their life that could impact another, um, positive or negative. We don't want to put ourselves on somebody else and make them do something the way that we would do it. We want them to move that way, and I think
mm,
that's so beautiful. And we need, even as coaches, whether we're because we're not licensed therapists, and that is not what I do. We do need to be
mm.
aware of ourselves because we do have some influence, and it's important to know what that is so that we either can temper it or use it to benefit, help someone move on their journey.
Yeah, that's so true, Felicia. And I relate that to what you said earlier about when you were talking about your children and
Mm,
how knowing about your type and their types and going, "Oh, let's try a different strategy here with my child." And I just imagined before you doing your inner growth work with the self-preservation three of wanting to I want to be good, and so this seems like a really good value to me. This feels like a good thing. I'm gonna, impart my sub. I'm gonna impart my self-preservation threeness into my children, if that makes
yeah,
sense. Because,
you
in,
have to be good. We have to be the good family.
yeah, and I was gonna ask. So in some ways, I mean, as parents, we mean well, and we're doing our best, and that's our way of loving our children to almost buy into the lie that we've brought into of this kind of false identity.
Mm,
And it's so lovely to have that kind of our eyes opened really to that kind of false identity that isn't really our true self. So we can in this generation, it's the lies stop in this generation, for want of a better way of wording it.
yeah.
And Um, I just think it's really important work. It really, I think the more I go into it, um, and the more I think about it, not just in a theological place in my head, but actually apply it in my own life, in my own relationships. Um, it's quite simple to say, oh yeah, the head center, the heart center, the body center, but these are profound things. To realize that we are in a certain center and what it actually means to be in those centers. And
Mm.
yeah, it's profound.
It is, and I mean, what a gift that we have to be
Yeah,
able to name them and then to help,
yeah,
hopefully, our children name them.
yeah,
If I wish I wish that I could have been on the reverse and, knowing your family. Everybody has their own family history, but what benefit it could
yeah,
have been to, my parents, my grandparents, to have just been able to name the things that are important to them and why and all of that. And I get that benefit. I get to say, "Hey, this is who I am. This is why, good or for bad." And I'm always trying to be, you know, the better self. I'm always trying to be more self-aware and helpful and whatnot. But I want to help you too. So here, children, here's some things that could be helpful to you. Take them
yeah,
or leave them, whatever is going to benefit you. But I mean, I wish I had that too from my own parent, So like, it's okay, Felicia. You don't have to perform for me, or you don't have to always be the best or achieve because that's you don't, you're loved for who you are. But it was it's what I grasped onto, and not to
mm,
say that it was is their fault. They just didn't know.
no,
So
yeah,
I want to tell my children, like, you don't have to do those things, even though that may be the thing that you're thinking you have to do. I get to say it to them and say, no, it's okay. Like you're loved just for who you are. And I love that.
Yeah. I also love it when I've heard people teach that our Enneagram type and our subtype, although it's kind of related to who we're not, it's also in some ways we kind of needed that identity as a sort of survival strategy in the world, as a way of being in the world, a way of kind of coping in the world. So it's on some ways we actually needed to kind of, as you've said, grab hold of it.
Sure.
Um, but then there comes a point where we realize we need to let go of it, and that
Mhm.
letting go process is. I relate that to the lifelong process of no, I can let go of this, you know.
Yeah. Oh, I really like that. That's a really good way to put it because you're right. That was who I was as a young person, good or for bad. I
Yeah,
did take those on. I would say successful because I was good at it.
yeah, of
But
course.
but I don't want to be that anymore because I know that there's something better.
Yeah,
And that's also a good thing. So
yeah,
yeah, it's really good.
absolutely.
Hmm.
And what a gift that we've been given, as you've said, at the stage and age that we are at. I mean, I imagine that some people have gone their whole life in this kind of illusion of they've not discovered who they really are, and that's really sad.
Yeah, when you read about the 3 archetype, I almost like I am sad for us because like what a sad life to constantly be if you're like the framework archetype, wearing those masks constantly and no one knows who you really are and you don't know who you really are.
Yeah,
Man, it breaks my heart and I don't want that for anybody, but you're right. Yeah, there are people who live that way, hit rock bottom and have to find their way out of it. I hope that they do. That's what I want for them
yeah.
too. Uh,
Yeah. And what I guess again, what a blessing it is that there are so many Enneagram coaches, and not just Enneagram coaches, but so many professionals in different in a therapy, spiritual direction, coaching, so many different ways that the Enneagram can be applied to our personal lives, professional lives. So the word is going out, isn't it?
yes,
And
I
that's
think
good.
so. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I love the history part of it in like the modern Enneagram as it is today, that it was, our Catholic and Jesuit brothers and sisters who like took this on to a T. They're like, yes, we love it. Thank you. Something to allow us to
Yeah.
turn towards Jesus. And Protestants were like, no, what is this?
Yeah.
And
And, yeah.
we're
I
slowly
think
getting
Protestants would be a little bit anything though from Catholic,
Yeah, that's true.
maybe.
Wait a minute. Is it coming from
Hang
the
on a minute.
Catholicism? That's so true. But we're getting
Yeah,
there. It is growing and I'm thankful for that. Whether someone
yeah,
decides to do coaching or not, even if they just stumble upon something and it gives them a little bit of taste of like, oh, I feel like I saw myself in that thing that you said or that post or that thing I read. Like, oh, okay, yeah, I think that's me. That's a good thing. I think it's always good. For good or for bad, finding out who a little bit more of who you are is always going to be good.
mm, yeah, I agree. Before I knew anything about the Enneagram, and I was having therapy back in 2014, and
Mm.
my time with my therapist at that point was coming to an end. I said, "What's the one thing that that you would tell me moving on from here? Like, what am I not seeing?" Or I can't remember exactly how I worded it, and he said to have self awareness.
Mm.
And I was like, okay, yeah, to self-awareness. And then when the Enneagram came in back into my life a bit later, a few years down the road, it was like almost as if seeds were being planted before the
Mm.
Enneagram arrived on my path. So I was kind of ready for it at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
I
amazing
love
how
that.
the journey of it. Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. And I think that's probably my favorite thing that I latch onto through the training and certification is that it is a journey, that it doesn't stop
yes,
once you just learn the information.
no,
Um, we
no,
constantly have to like rethink about it and learn something new. And doing a series
yeah,
like this where you're diving deeper into instinctual subtypes and we get to learn a different flavor of I'm just using that of a
yeah,
person out there in the
yeah,
world who and how they respond to things makes it so much more real and authentic. And as somebody who desires to be as authentic as I can be, even though I'm not a four, I want to be like a four because they just know who they are. And I want that for everybody. I want people to take the time to know that it's okay to not know everything, but we can also take steps towards learning some more. And
Mm,
we probably won't learn it all on this side of
yeah.
heaven.
No. Yeah, someone said to me at church on Sunday, and he doesn't know that I'm into the Enneagram, not yet anyway.
Uh,
And he said, there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom. He said, wisdom is knowing what to do with the knowledge. And he wouldn't have been aware what I was thinking about, but I was thinking about the Enneagram. It's one thing, as you just said, it's one thing having all of this head knowledge, and as a head type, give me the knowledge, give me the
yeah,
knowledge, give me the.
yeah,
I want to understand. I want to understand. I want to understand. Okay, but what are you actually doing with the information? Ah,
yeah.
yeah, good question.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
so good. That's so good. I really appreciate hearing that perspective because you're right.
yeah,
You can take it in and then what?
yeah. It's beautiful.
Mm.
So yeah, so is there anything else you'd like to share about your experience with the Enneagram from a Christian perspective?
I would say don't limit what God can do to anybody who's like out there, don't limit what God can do through what the world creates because God
Mm,
can use anything to bring about his glory. And if we want to be mindful and put up safe boundaries, absolutely. But as a Christian, we should also be open to what God can do versus what we think we shouldn't do. And I just want more people to experience the joy like it seems like me and you have experienced through our lives and transformation because it's good. It's good and God is good. So anything that's good, I believe, is from God. And if it brings about reconciliation, it can bring about transformation and enlightenment, all the things that are good. Yes, it does pull on some triggers, but that helps us let go of them, hopefully, as
yeah,
we work towards, improving ourselves to give ourselves to God.
yeah. That's profound. I had kind of had a picture as you were sharing earlier of um, God knows everything about us. He
Mm,
knows all of the places where we really hurt, and as the Enneagram is a self-awareness tool, it's almost as if, right, I'm gonna show you this piece of yourself now, Felicia. I'm gonna show
mm.
you this piece of yourself now, Matt. I already know that it's there, but I just want you to see it so we can get rid of it.
Yeah,
In whatever process that looks like, through therapy or through just being listened to, being healed in an instant or over the course of time. It's just kind of, oh yeah, okay, so now I need to work on this bit. Now I need to that self-awareness piece. And it is uncomfortable. It isn't always a pleasant journey, but it's really
yeah.
important though. It's nice that we're not going alone on this journey, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely, and I love
Yeah.
that image of Christ showing us, like, little pieces too, because I don't know if
Yeah.
we could handle all of the things
No,
that
I
we
know.
struggle with at once, but
Yeah.
even using a tool like the Enneagram kinda shows you a snapshot of, "Okay, here's this piece of who you are, let's talk about it, let's work through it," whatever that may be, versus,
Yeah.
like, "This is let me hold
Wow.
up all of your negativity and good luck." It's, "Let's walk through this piece by piece." So, yeah, I really like that, Matt. It's a good
Yeah.
image.
And I also wonder if the same applies actually the other way around. I need to show you a little bit of who you really are
Mm.
in smaller chunks, because if you were able to really see what you were really like in me, y- like we wouldn't either recognize ourselves, or we it would be too
Yes.
much. So
Oh, I love
yeah,
that. Oh, I love that. Yeah, kind of uncovering who God is in us and that glory piece that hopefully we have and, you
yeah,
know, in when we get to be with him. Wow, that's so good. I love that. I
yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to share that I haven't asked that you might want to share?
think so. Yeah,
Okay.
so
So,
good.
in terms of discovering your type, you mentioned earlier that in 2019, you took a test. You took
Yes.
your Enneagram assessment, and it
Yep.
came out number 3,
Yeah.
clear as day. So there wasn't a time where you were considering other numbers for yourself.
No, there wasn't, because when I read
Okay.
it, I thought for sure, and I went back and looked at my assessment scores because I was like, "Oh, what was that?" Was it really this? And all of the, like, top next numbers all related to it, so it was like
Wow.
3, 2, 9, 6, 4. I mean,
Wow.
3
How clear
literally.
can you
I
get?
know. It's like they all it was the week or my stress
Wow.
and security. I mean, it was just, "Yep, okay."
Wow. So
That's
I
me.
one maybe one way of looking at that, I mean, this is the way that's just come to my mind, is you must have really good self-awareness first to get that so accurate. That is
Well,
profound. To get the
well,
wings and the arrows,
I
like, wow.
know. How
That's
could I read that? That's so funny. But, it's funny because when I meet with some of my clients, they come in and they're like, "Oh, I just wanna learn more about myself and be more self-aware." And I'm also amazed, and I want to always tell them, like, "I think you're more self-aware than you know."
mm,
And hopefully that's uplifting because I think that
wow. Yeah.
as we mature and grow in our own lives, and we learn, like, we don't always have to be stressed, or we don't always have to, like, lean on some behavior from a different from our wings or whatever. We kind of get more middle ground. But as somebody who wants to be more open to whatever God has for my life, I want to end up there. I want to end up in the middle. And so I think that as I got older and when I took the test, I was in my late 20s. And so I wanted to, I wanted to be that. I wanted to be in the middle. I wasn't there yet, but I was striving for it. So I was already seeking that path of, like, how can I be more middle versus being, whatever I was feeling at the time. So I think that
Okay.
people want to do that. People want to be more grounded. I don't think people want to live in their stress all the time, or their
Yeah.
anxieties. So I think I was looking towards that, which helped, I think, when I was taking the test. And I also happened to be the age that was on that path of trying to figure out who I was.
Okay. So did you do, like, how many tests did you do? Did you do one test and that was it?
One, and then
Wow.
I read the book Road Back to
Wow.
You. That
Yeah.
was, yep, so good. Love that one. Several works by Suzanne Stabile, and yeah, I've never questioned it because it just
Wow.
fit so easy.
Wow.
Now, the self-preservation, I'll say Beatrice's work. That's when I really felt like the Enneagram clicked,
Right,
because
okay.
like, there's more to this than just the archetype. Reading the subtypes to me, like I said, was an expansion of, okay, when people say, like, oh, like, I don't want to take the test, what, nine, there's only nine and all the people in the world.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Subtypes to me just opened up the floodgates of, like, no, like, okay, yes, there's three, but they can also be like, they can lean towards this, like, their motivations are driven because of these other types of instincts. And I mean, it just blows my mind every time. Every time I read about someone's potential subtypes, or we cover it in a lesson, I just am like, see, like, oh yeah, I didn't see myself in that until you read that to me. Oh, it's so good, so
Yeah.
good.
It is. And how the obviously there's the subtypes, so there's like three different types of three, but also the instinctual sequence can be different as well. So for you,
Yes,
as a three, self-pres, sexual, social, you might have another self-pres three, social in the middle, and sexual repressed, and that can differ how the type shows up as well.
exactly. Which is so good. I mean, we want nobody
Yeah,
wants to nobody wants to have all of these
yeah,
exact same frameworks. We want diversity. That's the beauty of it. So
absolutely.
it's so good.
And obviously, our cultural overlay is going to shape how we grew up. Our parental overlay, the culture that around us. I don't actually believe that there is that I believe that there is a unique version of every single type. There's a unique version of every type 9, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Because of
I know.
those other factors, because of real life factors, you
Exactly,
know.
exactly. Yeah, nature versus nurture, cultural context. You know,
Yeah,
it was really interesting. I was just listening to Suzanne Stabile. She was doing an interview, and she was talking about instincts. And there's no study on this, and she had claimed, like, this is just her thought. She's just beginning to think this. Well, it's understood that you have a dominant instinct that maybe potentially something in your life could change the order, and
mm,
she had felt in her own personal experience that it had switched on her because of COVID. the way she had to respond to her
Okay.
environment because of a traumatic event like COVID for everybody else in the world. She had to change from what she was to something else. And whether
Mm,
that stays that way or not, who knows, but for her own personal experience. And I thought, well, that's interesting. There's nothing out there that says that this is true. So, and Beatrice is
yeah.
like the name all be all and instincts. I'm pretty set, but I do think that there's a big difference in how we respond culturally to what's going on around us. And I believe a
Yeah.
lot of people out there that are doing work in other Enneagram work in other cultures are starting to name that people act or respond differently depending on what culture they're responding to, whether it be their mother, culture or their culture that they're living in now. And I think that's so important, which then
Mm,
brings me back to what you said, that there is a unique individual type in the world that no one else can be. No one else is going to be you, Matt, and nobody else is going to be you, Felisha. And that is
yeah.
good. We want that. But there's a framework that can help us be our better self. And that's the
Yeah.
unique.
Absolutely. And just relating to what you shared there, I've heard that there's certain parts of the world, certain countries that has like a type 3 overlay, a
Mhm.
type 9 overlay. So there's like the type, the nine types can overlay in the country, but
Yeah.
so can the instincts. Like this is more of a
Oh,
separation instinct overlay or sexual overlay or social overlay. And going back to
okay.
what you said about Susan Stabile, I think that's why CP Enneagram teached it's not a stack, like it's not static. It's a
Yeah.
sequence in that as their survival instincts, by their very nature, survival instincts, when one is being, you know, when we need that instinct to kick in, it's gonna kick in. But just our generally speaking, that it goes
Right.
back into its normal distorted
Sure.
um sequence, if that makes sense, until we
Yeah.
consciously work on bringing them into balance,
Oh, I
which
like
is a
that.
conscious thing rather than when they're needed, they might come up. But obviously, if
Yeah.
there's a repressed instinct and it's obviously repressed for a reason. Um, but yeah, it is interesting how it can move and change as needed.
Yeah, and I wonder if, and maybe this is a three thing, but when I read about the different subtypes, I thought, well, I want that, but I know that's
Okay.
really my instinct. Like I want to,
Right. Okay.
my repressed. I'm not trying to be the like lack of better words, like the peacock in the room. I'm like, look at me, I'm pretty. It's more like what's the good thing to do to make sure that we're going to be okay, that we're going to survive, that we're going to make it through
Yeah.
this season, that we're going to be, the preservation part of it. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
funny
Of
because I can
course.
see pieces of it. I'm like, oh yeah, I actually think there was a time in my life where I would have leaned towards that, probably when I was younger and wanting to be whatever anybody else wanted me to be looked good, that I could have seen that come up more. So I like that, depending on where you were and what comes up in your life.
Yeah. So because the social instinct is repressed in you, isn't it? The
Yeah, so
social one. Yeah.
social, yeah, the front, yeah, so sexual definitely, so sexual can be in the middle, but the
Yeah.
social aspect of being up front and center, like on the stage.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was a theater major, so I mean that just made me laugh every time I read that. I think, oh gosh, but I wanted to be in theater, not to be like front and stage. I love the idea of taking on a form, like an authentic form that
Wow.
somebody wrote about and being able to
Yeah.
present it to the world. It was also
Wow.
really easy for me because I didn't have to be myself, take on something else.
Yeah.
And I
Wow.
wasn't always vying for like the main lead role. It was, I wanted to be a good actress because I was good at least in my brain I was. I didn't want to
Yeah.
be known for being, like the main person, but because somebody saw me and said, "Oh, I could see that you were really into that." So different
Mm,
parts throw in there, but yeah,
yeah.
it's so interesting.
Yeah. That's amazing. That because the type threes, that self deceit piece about
Yeah.
being something that we're not, and being masterful at it, but unconsciously masterful at it. So applying that to a different character on a stage or in a movie set. I wonder actually, I've never thought this before. I wonder if type threes have an easier job of it because they do that in their ordinary life.
Maybe.
Yeah,
I mean, I would always tell my husband, I thought, like, he said, how can you just like memorize things so quickly and take them
yeah.
on?
Wow.
And you can act on stage and say all of those words. Because remember, I'm not an oral processor. He's like, you can just spew out all of this great theater work and when you need to talk in real life, you start to stumble and, your words are kind of
Wow.
all over the place. I said, because I can memorize it, I can take it on with ease. It's easy to become somebody else and be whatever, it's given to me. That form, that the image, the mask, the character is given to me. So I can just take it on and be it. I don't have to create it or live it out in real life. So that was easy for me back then when I did that.
Wow. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Felicia.
Yeah.
So when did you first hear about the subtypes, and what was that? How has knowing? You've kind of briefly touched on that earlier a little bit, but how has knowing you are self-preservation 3 been really helpful for you in your life?
Yeah, subtypes came in about 2 years later, so as probably
Okay.
2020 actually, when I had more time to read. So I slowly started picking up Enneagram books and things like that, and someone had mentioned that there was, like, subtypes, and I thought, again, "What is this thing? Like, what does that
Yeah.
mean? Well, let me dive in." I bought Beatrice's book, which is a beast in itself, but, of course, immediately flipped to 3, and as I'm reading them, again, like I said, it was like light bulb moment. Okay, now I'm this counter type, which makes sense because I always struggled with, like, being the flashy,
Hmm.
like, "Ugh, I don't want that. That's not who I am." But I am this. I am somebody who works hard, who strives for being good and wants to be good. It's not only just to look like I'm successful. I want to be that. I want to be the good person that I say that I'm going to be as. And as a believer, I definitely want that. I don't want to be a fake person out in the world, to have that filter or say like, "Oh, I'm a good faithful Christian." I actually want to be it, and that's a battle or I feel like I'm constantly in conflict with trying to be my authentic self with the person that I know is actually going to succeed in this world. And being an American, where I would say the overlay of a 3 is very popular. Being that
Yes.
successful,
Yeah, it's like a double up.
achieve what, yeah, what you level up, you climb the ladder. It is
Mm,
praised, beyond praised here. If you can
wow.
make it. I remember as a child, they would ask you, like, "Are you going to go to college?" Because that was the thing to do. Everybody raise your hand if you're going to go off to a college. You got to get in the best college and pass all these tests and ugh. But I thought, okay, yeah, those are the things that I have to do in my life. But I struggled because that's not necessarily what I really wanted. Like internally, I wanted to be good. I wanted to be seen as good and all of those things. But I didn't want to get into those schools just to show off that I could. I wanted to prove that I could,
Mm,
or whatnot, whatever it was in my life. I'm just using school as an example. Learning that that's actually like a true thing, that I'm not. I never questioned that I was a 3, but it kind of confirmed that okay, I can have these feelings of not quite fitting the mold per se by being that counter type of pushing against the upfront and center stage person to being somebody who can be successful in the background, who's still motivated by being efficient and productive and doing
yeah.
big. I love strategic planning. I love big thinking. I like easy, no problem there. Um, Asking you to sit down and be vulnerable and think through my feelings not so much, but I'm trying to be
Yeah.
better. So it's helpful to again have that language to say, okay, this is who I am. This is why I'm motivated this way. And how can I get out of that? And that's what I love about Beatrice's work. She doesn't just name it, she also provides those helpful transformational ways of, okay, this is what you could do if you are an instinctual 3, self preservation. Maybe,
Yeah.
let go of that and recognize that there is goodness in just who you are, which is nice.
Mm. Thanks for sharing that, Felicia. And just as you were sharing, I couldn't help but think about some of the stereotypes around male and female. I don't
Yeah.
know what it's like where you are, but in this country, typically, stereotypically, at least in my head, in my understanding, until like a few years ago, males were typically not very good with their emotions,
Mm.
and females typically more better with their emotions. But it's interesting to hear from yourself as a female and um, being a self-preservation 3, in the heart center, yet really struggling to have that what I would call emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Normally, it's the men that kind of, struggle to talk about their feelings, but that's another stereotype, because it will all depend on what the person's Enneagram type and subtype is, will depend on how that shows up. So it just breaks down all of these stereotypes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think.
that's very true. And funnily, I feel like as if to live into the stereotype, I will repress my feelings down until they explode. And then I
Mm,
become like a blubbering mess, right? That would be the stereotype of a female. But it's usually
yeah,
because I just don't know what to do with it. And it just comes
yeah.
out. It's so much easier. And then that masculine, feminine, like, oh, you just need to and I think that's just also cultural. Like you just need to buck up, is what people would say here. Pull yourself
Okay.
up and be successful. You don't
Oh
have
my good.
time. You don't have time to have feelings. Just
Yeah.
get over it.
Don't say that to a self-preservation three, because they're already doing that
I know.
in a type three overlay culture. Like, no,
I
don't say
know.
that.
I
Yeah.
know. uh,
Again, this is another significant way where it's so helpful in how we can um, encourage the type to go in a different direction when we know that we're pointing it in the direction of our, more essential self, who God really created us to be. I love that tree image you talked about from AJ Sherrill, the root system, going deep into who we really are.
yeah, it's so
Yeah,
good. Ugh.
it is good. Is there anything else about being a self-preservation three that you found most helpful as a Christian?
I don't know if this is self-preservation, but it might be. Other directedness is something that Beatrice talks about. I think this is just in three in general. A lot of people think that threes are, egotistical, really focused on their self, trying to build themselves to be something that others will love. But it's really exactly that, what others will love, and
Mm,
focusing outward. Okay, then as a self preservation, it's how can I be the best at what's going to be like the best in the moment? Like, how can I be good and successful in achieving in what I have right now? And so that I'm secure in that. I find security in knowing that it's going like that I'm going to be good at it. So if I this came back to the Enneagram thing, if I know I'm not going to win, if I know I'm not going to be good at it, then I won't do it. And that can be
mm,
harmful for me to actually step out of my box and try something new or push myself. So, as a Christian, to take on becoming an Enneagram coach, I really had to say, as I said earlier, like, I cannot take this as do it and fail and don't tell anybody and do it for my own glory. It was, I really just got to do this to see what God has for it. And that
mm,
takes a lot of work because it's pushing against that motivation of, well, I want to be good and I want to keep trying to do things to be successful instead of just sitting and trusting and doing good work and putting out things that are to me actually going to be beneficial for others. So that other focus, like I want others to see me as good, recognizing that as a believer that I don't necessarily have to do that so that I'm loved. It could be just for the love of others, and
mm,
also for myself to be okay, not knowing where it could lead. And it doesn't have to be Enneagram coaching, but in life in general.
mm. Thank you for sharing that, Felicia, and for being vulnerable and sharing that. And it just goes to show the level of self awareness that you have, and the growth journey that you're on and that you've been on. And it's very inspiring to hear all that you've shared. It really
Yeah.
is. Thank you. So I know that you work with the Enneagram professionally.
Mhm.
Can you just share with us what it is that you do and where people can find out more about your work and what you have to offer?
Sure. I am a certified Enneagram coach, and I can be found at honestlyu.com. I am on social media, Instagram at honestlyu Enneagram or Facebook. And my goal is just to help other believers know who they are, so that they can turn towards God. So that's my push out there in the world.
Awesome. And I'll put a link to those in the description box
Yeah.
below, so anyone can just go click on them and go straight there.
Thank you.
Felicia, is there anything else you'd like to add before we close off?
Good, Matt. I really have enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much for your time and all that you've shared. It really has been insightful. I think it's going to be really helpful for everyone that's going to watch this to have an insight into the self-preservation 3. So thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome. Thanks, Matt.